I always thought the perfect one and done watch doesn't exist. The Explorer 1 is too expensive, the Seamaster 300mm, that bit too bold. The khaki field Murph, perhaps a little too plain. Then I tried a watch that isn't hitting the market until 2026, and it changed my mind. So maybe it'll change yours as well. Welcome to Doug's Watches, the Thinking Watch channel. Here I don't really do watch reviews. Instead, I like to provide a more thoughtful perspective on watches, connecting art, design, history, theory and philosophy to the world of watches. And if that sounds good to you, do make sure to like and subscribe. What is the one watch collection? So the one and done watch is a weird concept for a lot of us watch collectors. Why on earth would you want just one watch? Why on earth would you not want 100 different little machines tracking this intangible fourth dimension? It's a compelling argument. However, with that said, with my personal watch collection now exceeding 20 pieces, which I know isn't a massive collection, I do still feel overwhelmed at times. And if you've been in this hobby a while, I reckon you probably can empathise with this statement. Just ask yourself, have you ever stood not sure which dive watch to wear that day, or what native strap to put on your Seiko strap monster, or even if you should pick a dressy or sporty piece that day? But then with all these questions asked, you've just found yourself picking up the same watch as the day before, and the day before that as well, because it was easy and the safe, reliable option. If that's you, then I don't doubt that you've considered the notion of the one and done watch, an incredibly alien concept to a lot of us on Watch YouTube, I know. But believe me, there are people out there that do it. There are people who have a neo-vintage Seamaster 300mm and wear it with their tuxedo, and in the process commit a style faux pas without caring. There are people who wear their Tissot Gentleman year-round and don't lust after anything more expensive. There are people who have a quartz pulsar and that's it. That is their watch. They've made a one and done work for them. And you might be able to argue that they are only happy because they don't know about the beauty of other watches that are out there. But as we know, ignorance is bliss, and a state of bliss is increasingly hard to find in this world. However, for the watch collector, the one and done tends to fall into one of two camps. And I think both of them are fueled by a desire to return to a more minimalistic way of doing things. The intentional act of living with as little as possible to reduce the wider noise and decision fatigue in our lives. Maximise our satisfaction with what we actually do have and make sure that we retain our focus and energy for the things that really do matter to us. I'll return to this quite big idea later, don't you worry. But first, the two camps of one and done watch collectors. Let's get that out of the way. First is what we now call the exit watch. I've pumped 6 figures into my watch box. That includes everything from Seiko to IWC, and I'm going to sell it all and have a white gold 5811 Nautilus or something from Vacheron, and that is it. I have completed my watch journey. Or there's the other way of looking at one and done, the more frequently discussed go anywhere, do anything watch, or as we're now going to abbreviate it to, GADA. Now the go anywhere, do anything watch as an idea is an interesting one, because after all, how frequently is your watch holding you back from what you're doing in your day-to-day life? There are very few restaurants in the world that will turn you away for wearing a G-Shock, and very few sports that will actually finish off your Submariner. The GADA watch is less a category of watch and more so a challenge. It's equivalent to the petrolhead's one-car solution. Is it the Porsche 911 Turbo? No, it's the BMW M3 Competition. It's not actually a watch. There is no universal answer, only the answer for you in your current life. It's the source of endless discussion as a result, the sort of thing that those obsessed with everyday carry and what's in my bag content adore. But the often cited examples of the perfect GADA watch all in reality have their faults. The Rolex Explorer 1, well, it's quite expensive. Are you really comfortable wearing $6,000 everywhere? I think not. The Omega Seamaster 300mm, it's great with a chunky knit or a polo, but with a suit, quite frankly, it is a bit ridiculous. The Hamilton Khaki Field Murph, a lovely watch, sure, but I wouldn't call it pretty, nor would I call it visually stimulating either. That's because we're retroactively fitting the title of GADA to watches not intended for that purpose. So if you go back a few years, before COVID, back into forums and to Hodinkee and Fratello articles with substandard imagery, you'll find the word the watch community used before GADA. That was the travel watch. Now, the watches included in this category were your dressier field watches and nice dive watches, sure, but they weren't labelled and marketed as travel watches ever. The travel watch is not a widely recognised category of watch. But that is what Abinger sell this watch as, a travel watch. It's robust enough for your field watch duties, waterproof to 200 meters so it can survive the beach and then some, but with its traditional sports watch edge and sunburst dial, you're not getting turned away from your dinner reservation either. Effectively, everything you could really need from a watch while travelling, taking what life throws at you. The Abinger Nimrod is the culmination of a series of subtle changes and evolutions that I think might be the start of a new category of watch and a new era of watch design. And for full transparency, I've just had this in for a few days. There is no arrangement. The team simply lent this to me for a bit of content, which is awesome. This is the Ardent Fell, basically the brown dial, but there's also a green and a black, and it's a shining example of what the go anywhere, do anything watch can be. Robust like a dive watch, simple and legible like a field watch, with a 12-hour bezel to give its second time zone tracking as well to boot. Now, as I tend not to do watch reviews, and this isn't a watch review but a discussion of one and done, I'll spare you the full examination of this watch. However, as this watch isn't out until March next year, you probably won't have seen this yet and may appreciate a detail or two. But effectively, this is the true Goldilocks watch, a 38mm wide case, 10.9mm thick, and a 45mm lug-to-lug, with a 20mm lug width, meaning this watch will fit most of your favourite NATO and leather straps. Beneath the dial, it sports a Miyota 9039 movement, a favourite of microbrands these days. This has a display caseback which showcases a custom rotor as well. The case has nice little touches, a signed and screw-down crown. The bracelet has a wonderful taper from 20mm down to 16mm, and it also features a quick-release system. This meets at the lovely machine-to-clasp, which has 2 links of on-the-fly micro-adjustment. Basically, this watch has listened to every complaint that the modern watch community can throw at a watch and rectify it, which is brilliant to see. And for all that, what will you pay? Well, if you're in the UK, £650. Pretty good, if you ask me. And if you're abroad, you've got £30 shipping and local taxes as well, putting this in the region of $850 or €750 before tax and shipping. Not too bad, but I'd argue this seems like much better value for us Brits for once. Normally it seems like we often get the worse end of the bargain in the watch world. And that's enough watch review for now. We'll return to the Aura system, my semi-objective way of ranking watches at the end though, so stick around for that. Now this watch, well, it does tick a lot of boxes, doesn't it? And as a result of that, you might think that it seems a little designed by committee, meaning that it was put together to meet certain demands and not be one cohesive whole. However, I disagree. And so may I introduce Tom, the man behind both Abinger and the Nimrod. And what's most interesting about this watch is its inspiration. Now Tom tells the story of how he got properly, meaning in the less than healthy way many of us are, into watches. And that was through the inheritance of his father-in-law's Montblanc Time Walker. That's an emotional moment that a lot of us can empathise with, but it's just one of the 4 sparks in the creative process to this watch. The others, the Longines Spirit Zulu Time, the Glashütte CQ, the Nomos Club Sport, all brilliant watches but not perfect. But by mentioning them as inspirations, there's a refreshing humility in this piece. The inspiration is there if you look for it. The bezel, well, that evokes Longines. The numeral on the dial, that's a little Nomos, and the 6 is very CQ. The sunburst effect, that's all CQ again. But this watch isn't an homage or a hodgepodge of styles that don't quite go together. It's still gone through that creative and intentional design process that makes great watches, and I think that means we might be looking at one of the most important watches of 2026 when it ships next March. Because through combining these elements, it has cherry-picked the bits from each that make them a great contender as a GADA watch, and in turn creates, or at least reawakens, that category of watch we spoke about years ago, the travel watch. Yes, the watch that fits in with whatever you're doing, no matter what you're doing with it. But most importantly, always does what you need it to when you're off on your adventure. And the design of this watch has been informed by this. Traditionally, a great travel watch may need a GMT complication on the movement, but Abinger points out that the Miyota 9075 GMT movement is 1mm taller. So while the watch would gain in its GMT credentials, it would lose in its ability to be a dressy tool watch and hide up your sleeve come dinner. This sort of informed design has been well considered elsewhere on the watch. The only polishing is on the clasp and on the back of the case. The rest is brushed, the intention being that while adventuring, these other elements are likely to get scratched, and scratches on brushed metal tend to not show so much as those on polished surfaces. And it's this thought process, not what it's capable of, that makes this watch a truly great travel watch, a GADA watch, and a great one and done that could take its place in those everyday carry and what's in my bag videos. The Abinger Nimrod sports the design intention that creates a versatile tool that through its adaptability earns its place in a minimal selection of tools. In watches, I think we get minimalism wrong. Now, minimalism in its most simple terms is design using few elements for maximal effect. It's just since the avant-garde movements like the Bauhaus emerged, the word has come to take on a host of different sentiments from anti-consumerism to stoicism. But I think we've equally got it wrong in the world of watches. When the word minimalism is raised, we point to Junghans, Nomos, and maybe Braun. These are minimal watches, in as much as not much design has gone into them on the surface, but that does not mean they are inherently minimalist watches. Minimalism is about the thoughtful application of design to create maximal output, and that is what is going on here with the Nimrod. A watch truly designed to be capable for all occasions. Yes, it is a sports watch, but thanks to the hard work of Rolex through the quartz crisis, this style of watch can now be jewellery for dinner dates and galas. No, it doesn't feature a chronograph, but when do you actually use your chronograph for something meaningful? And you're a grown-up, just do some mental maths if you're typing something. Yes, brown might not be as legible as black underwater, but are you really diving far enough for it to matter? The loom on the bezel and dial clearly makes up for this, and when paired with the lollipop secondhand, it's clearly something to behold. My argument is that this is a true minimalist watch, not one that is purely co-opting the aesthetic of minimalism. Because of the design considerations of this watch, I reckon it's the sort of thing you'd see in those videos those minimalist and productivity-obsessed YouTube vlogs would have in their everyday carry. Because this isn't a beautiful watch in the conventional sense, but one that's function follows its form, and that is what makes it beautiful. Which I think you'll find overlaps with the core tenets of the Bauhaus movement. Can the one watch collection exist then? And that brings us nicely onto some sort of conclusion on the nature of the go anywhere do anything watch and the one watch collection. I think they can exist, yes, and in reality not just a hypothetical thought exercise. That's why it's a fun discussion, and it's impossible to conclude because we're not actually debating on something objective, the true form in an Aristotelian sense, but instead which imperfect imitation of it we happen to prefer and happens to come out on top. But to find your go anywhere do anything watch, or your one watch collection, requires consideration, and consideration of the watch as a whole. So that means not only its design and its price point, but also the reality of your use of the watch. And the perfect one watch, as a result, is an inherently Bauhaus-inspired watch, but not because it follows a minimal and non-offensive design like a Nomos, but because it follows a considered one, meaning its form always follows its function. And that's what this Abinger does here. But for Tom, the man behind the brand, and maybe some of us as well. Maybe it isn't the considered design for you, but that doesn't mean the right one isn't out there. And if you get something else instead, let me know below. The Aura system. Right then, not a review channel, I know, but the Aura system is my little pet project. And yes, I've stolen this format from Doug DeMuro in the car space. I judge watches on 4 metrics that give us a holistic viewpoint on watches, in a hope for us to be able to compare watches within a price point, but also across them. So, aestheticism. No surprise here, I'm going 9 out of 10. This is obviously right up my street from a beauty standpoint. We have those Longines, Nomos and Glasout inspired elements, but also from its proportions, there's also a bit of modernised Black Bay 54 in there as well, so it all really speaks to me. And as we've discussed earlier, this is a masterclass in intentional design, and for once, I actually like a flat sapphire crystal. However, I've docked it a mark as adjusting the bracelets was a little bit of a pain, but that might have been a me problem. I've always had a bit of a nightmare with this. Utility, that's minimal spend and maximum output. Again, 9 out of 10. If we were outside the UK though, it may be a different story. Romanticism, 8 out of 10. Microbrands always have an endearing quality to them, there's no doubt about that. I do also think that with this being a travel and adventure focused watch, it leaves room for you to make your own fantasies and make-believe stories, so that's a bit of a strong point there, bolstering its romantic credentials. Authenticism, 8 out of 10. This watch isn't trying to be a Submariner for 1/10 the price. It's honest about its offering and open with its story and inspirations. In fact, let's make that 9 out of 10. So tossing up the scores on the doors, that's a total of 35, which so far makes this watch the best scoring watch I've had in. And I think that is a pretty fair assessment. It punches well above its weight, as you'd expect from a micro brand. Somewhere on your screen, YouTube is desperately trying to predict what you want to watch next. Chances are it's a good one, so feel free to follow it. And if you want an extra video each month and your name in the credits, consider joining the channel as a member. Otherwise, like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.